Hello and welcome to my page. Today is Tuesday and that means it's time for True Crime Tales. If you haven't noticed, there is a new schedule. This is just to make it a little easier for me going into the new year and also allowing me to have my weekend off instead of filming on Sundays. So stick with me. It'll be worth it, I promise. Paul Michael Stefani was an American serial killer. He was also known as the Weepy-Voiced killer due to a series of telephone calls he made to police, anonymously reporting his crimes in a remorseful and high-pitched voice. Stefani killed 3 women in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. Paul Stefani was the second of 10 children born into a Catholic family. I don't know why, but that always feels like it's significant information because, like, there was immediate remorse after he did the crimes, but then he, like, committed more crimes. Though he felt guilty afterwards. I don't know. His mother remarried when he was 3 years old, giving him a stepfather who was known to beat his stepchildren and sometimes throw them down the stairs. Sounds like a lovely man. Stefani was married to Beverly Leiter and fathered a daughter with her, but the couple soon divorced. He held down several jobs, but was fired from a janitor position at Malmberg Manufacturing Company in 1977. His first victim's body would be discovered near this building. On December 31st, 1980, Stefani beat Karen Potak in St. Paul, Minnesota, inflicting severe wounds and a brain injury. Stefani himself called police at 3 a.m. to report the attack, directing police to a location where, quote, "there is a girl hurt there," end quote. I never understood the people that, like, call in their own crimes, but, like, there's just a whole, like, true crime series on Hulu that, like, is about the killer calling 911 and then trying to, like, get away with it and be like, oh, I found my wife like this, when in reality I'm the one who, like, murdered my wife. But yeah, there's, like, a whole... So it happens. It does happen. His next victim was Kimberly Compton, an 18-year-old student from Pepin, Wisconsin on June 3rd, 1981, in neighboring Minneapolis. After killing her, he again contacted police, pleading, quote, "Goddamn, will you find me? I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody." End quote. And honestly, I just want to know, like, did he try? Did he try to stop killing? Or was this just, like, a cop-out? Like, you ever just wonder, like, because they're sociopaths, they're psychopaths, which means they don't really have empathy or sympathy or, you know, feelings. And, like, I always wonder, like, do they actually try to stop, or are they just, like, trying to blame somebody else for what they're doing, maybe? I don't know. 2 days later, he called police to say he was sorry for stabbing Compton and would turn himself in, but did not. And hence why I said, did he really feel sorry? Did he really try to stop? Because, like, if you wanted to stop and you really wanted to stop, you could have turned yourself in and you would have been done. Just the one person. Just the, well, okay, 2 people. Just the 2 people would be dead. But no. On June 6th, he called to say newspaper accounts of some of the murders were inaccurate. His next call was on June 11th. In a whispering, barely coherent voice, he cried, "I'm sorry for what I did to Compton." I also had questioned, like, maybe this guy was drinking or something, and maybe that was, like, you know, like, he knew what he was doing, but he didn't know what he was doing, if that makes sense. So, like, you know, I don't know how to explain it. As somebody who was an alcoholic, who is a recovering alcoholic and always will be, you have memory of what you did, but you don't really have the feelings applied to it until, like, a later time when you've sobered up. And that's what I originally maybe thought, like, was going on here, was that, like, he was drunk and, you know, he knew what he did, but he didn't really feel sorry about it until he sobered up. But it never really came about, like, I couldn't find any information that said that he was intoxicated or high or anything that, you know, would have inebriated his brain. So, I don't know. His next victim was Kathleen Greening, who was found dead at her home just outside St. Paul. Stefani later confessed to drowning her in her bathtub at her Roseville residence. Also, if you've noticed that none of these people died the same way, so there's not, like, a clear, like... So if he hadn't been calling the police to confess, they probably would not have linked these people together. But, like, there was no clear modus operandi here. there was no clear MO here. Almost all of them died in different ways. Stefani later confessed to drowning her in her bathtub at a Roseville residence. His fourth victim and last murder victim was Barbara Simmons, a 40-year-old nurse on the Minneapolis side of the Mississippi River. The two met at the Hexagon Bar after Stefani asked Simmons for a cigarette. Okay, you know what? Let me say this could also be Simons. I want to make that clear because it's only one M, but I'm saying Simmons, so I'm not sure. After spending the night at the bar with Stefani, Simmons told a waitress, "He's cute. I hope he's nice since he's giving me a ride home." Simmons was found stabbed to death the next day. There were no calls after Greening's death, but the Weepy-Voiced killer contacted police after the murder of Simmons. "Please don't talk. Just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was first one, over in St. Paul." Stefani picked up a 19-year-old sex worker named Denise Williams on August 21st, 1982 in Minneapolis. Williams said something was wrong when Stefani began driving through a dark suburban area rather than returning her back to the city where he originally picked her up. After turning on a dead-end road, he stabbed her 15 times with a screwdriver. During the attack, Williams was able to hit Stefani on the head with a glass bottle, causing cuts to his head and face. Her screams drew the attention of a man who lived nearby, and upon seeing Stefani trying to stab Williams again, began to wrestle with him, causing Stefani to flee the scene. The man was able to call for an ambulance and later help identify Stefani. However, when Stefani returned home to his apartment, he noticed he was bleeding badly and sought medical help. It was this call that confirmed Stefani was the Weepy-Voiced killer and linked him to the Williams attack. Further investigative work later connected Stefani to the murder of Simmons. Sorry, I'm really struggling with her last name today. In 1997, Stefani was diagnosed with skin cancer and had less than a year to live. He decided to confess to the murders of Kim Compton, Barbara Simmons, and Kathy Greening. He had not even been a suspect in the Greening murder, as he had not made a phone call to police as he had done in the other cases. In all, he confessed to a beating attack in 1980, that was Potak, stabbing Kimberly Compton to death in 1981, drowning Kathleen Greening in 1982, stabbing Barbara Smith to death in 1982, and stabbing Denise Williams in 1982. During Stefani's trial in the Simmons murder case, Stefani's ex-wife, sister, and a woman who lived with him testified that they believed the hysterical caller revealing the attacks was Stefani. These observations alone were not enough to identify Stefani as the Weepy-Voiced killer, since the hysterical crying distorted the voice. Stefani was convicted of the Simmons murder and of the attempted murder of Williams and was sentenced to 58 years. He died in prison in 1998 from skin cancer. The case was covered by Case File True Crime Podcast on April 16, 2016, and an episode Seeing Red of Murder Calls on January 15, 2017, and in an episode of World's Most Evil Killers. Stefani's crimes were then reported during episode 102 of the podcast, And That's Why We Drink, on January 13, 2019. This case was also covered in an episode on the podcast My Favorite Murder, which is a really absurd name for a podcast because you shouldn't have a favorite murder. That's just weird. On May 23, 2019, this case was also featured on an episode of Morbid, a true crime podcast on January 9, 2021. The show Mark of a Killer featured the case on its 7th episode titled Killer Caller. So, like I said, he's been on a lot of TV shows, but yeah, there's like this whole, the Murder Calls, that's the whole, like, true crime documentary, and there's like several seasons. So it's not, it happens a lot more than you think it would, but yeah, like, you guys should check them out. It's on Hulu. So, obviously you'll need to subscribe to Hulu, but it's worth it. I watch so much true crime stuff over there. Like, right now I'm currently watching, The Killer Speaks, which is pretty good. I just finished Killer Cases, and prior to that, Evil Lives Here. So there's actually really good shows over there. So I fully recommend this. It's on ad because I'm not endorsed by Hulu, but I recommend investing in Hulu and A&E True Crime Central because, yeah, that's where you're going to find it all. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.